When the workers' inspiration through the union's blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. All the world that's owned by idle drones is ours and ours alone. We have laid the wide foundation, raised it skyward stone by stone. It is ours not to slave in, but to master and to own. For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
It is May 30th, 2004, Folklife Festival. This is Utah Phillips, folklorist, folk singer, direct action activist, industrial worker of the world for 50 years. It is such a pleasure to interview you. Anyway, first question is, Arundhati Roy says not only is another world possible, but she's on her way. So how do you see, what hope do you see for this better world that's possible?
Well, the thing that makes it imminently possible is that the one we're in is impossible. This is an impossible world we're in. It's a world that can't survive. It's a world that can't survive the diminishing sunlight because of the particulate matter that's hanging in the air, which doesn't affect human beings. We only think in those terms, but affects all animals, affects all plants, affects the root of where our being comes from. And where does our food come from, Where does our clothing come from? Where does everything that we live in come from? It comes from the biosphere, which is under serious, serious assault. We're damning and dooming ourselves, so it is essential that we have a different kind of future. And that's what will impel us toward it. I think that at root, we have to understand that if you get up every morning and you turn on CNN or you turn on Fox News, you turn on even Amy Goodman and Democracy Now!, or you pick up your Nation magazine and read it, if you take your information from the top down, from the national and international level down, you're going to be in a constant state of panic and crisis. You're going to have a constant negative attitude. You're going to be scared to death and think the world is going to hell in a wheelbarrow. But if you turn all that off and walk out your front door and see what people are doing locally to bring about that new world, and you plug into that and you participate in that, it's the only way it'll get done. And oh, by the way, you'll feel a whole lot better. I do that. But I do that all over the country. And every place I go, I find people doing that. And I find every kind of organization that there is slowly beginning to network to rebuild a whole progressive movement at the grassroots. There are too many good people out there doing too many good things for me to afford the luxury of being pessimistic. I am, as Nelson Mandela said, a prisoner of optimism.
Oh, well, wonderful. Rosa wanted me to ask you about Wobbly slogans, and old and new. She was hoping for some labor slogans.
Anti-boss slogans.
Well, just dump the bosses off your back, or there are the old paper things, stickers we called silent agitators that used to paste up in the outhouses and the logging camps, that did worker education, but you didn't have to be there. See, one of them shows a factory and a worker been laid off, sitting there, on a soapbox around a campfire, gazing wistfully at his former job. And the next panel shows the boss, who was always in a tuxedo with a diamond stick pin and a cigar and a stovepipe hat, sitting there at that same campfire, gazing wistfully at his former factory. And the caption said, "Lay the boss off, it makes more sense." But my favorite slogan is in Latin: "Mors ante servitium," death before employment. That's an old tramp slogan.
Well, we understand that you were at the Tent City in Bothell a couple of days ago. So what hope do you see there in their community?
Oh, I see a prodigious amount of hope. The real hope in the tent city up there is the same that I see in Dignity Village outside Portland, or Camp Paradise in Santa Cruz, and the homeless villages that I've been visiting up and down the coast, and that is a system of internal organization. Let's start at the top. Dr. Leakey from Old Divide Gorge, he, virtually on his deathbed, said, "I've studied human beings all my life, and I've learned one thing, that we are innately cooperative." It's a whole different paradigm than the one we grew up with. You know, the one that was thrown at us, that we're competitive, that it's all dog eat dog. That's a bunch of maladjusted misfits who use that hyper competitiveness in order to scrabble and scrooge their way to the top, and then justify their malfeasance, justify their greed by ascribing it to the rest of us. That simply isn't true. That just isn't true. We are innately cooperative. And these people are out on a limb and they're left alone. And people, when they're left alone, get organized, you see. I remember when I was in Chicago during a big flood. I had landed at O'Hare Airport. The airport was surrounded with water, and nothing could move. Everybody was standing in a line waiting at the community service counter, you know, for service. Finally, at 8 o'clock, the squawk box came on and said, "The employees are going home. They'll be back at 8 o'clock in the morning." And everybody left. There was only one place that had food, way at the other end of the airport. Within an hour, people were pooling their luggage and sending one person to get the food. They were scavenging the airplanes parked there for blankets. They were waking up young people on the benches so older people could lie down. If we'd been there 3 days, that damn place would have been organized. As it is, the next morning, the service people came in, and there was everybody standing at the desk waiting as an individual to be serviced, you see, one at a time. So we are innately cooperative. Leave us alone and we will organize. And that's exactly what's happened out here at Tent Village. They've got a system of internal organization. They have a judicial, you know, they have regulations. They have a way to assign tasks. They have a way to assign merits. And if you meet those merits, then you're a member of the community. If you're not, then you're reprimanded. And if you're still not, you're not there anymore. There's a system of governance and self-help that has really blossoms in that situation. Of course, there's no drugs and there's no booze. You're out of there right away. I think it's marvelous watching that and feeling that, in seeing living proof of that propensity towards self-organization. Let us alone. We'll figure it out.
Exactly. Finally, I teach high school, and what kind of advice do you have for these darlings who are graduating in 2004 about labor, about peace, about anti-war, the environment? What would you like to tell them?
Well, they're teenagers. You can't tell them anything. Come on. Yes, you can. I get along great with young people, mainly because of Ani DeFranco gave me the introduction to those young minds, and I love doing that. There's no reason for you to get out of high school, my friend, without knowing what a scab is and why not to be one. Your school experience didn't give you a damn thing about labor history. It didn't give you anything about that you have the right to join and form a union, that you have the absolute right of collective bargaining. And that's why, because the boss owns the school system, the boss owns the publishing company that publishes your textbooks, you know. Your whole curricular process has been keyed towards churning you out into the workplace with answers, but God help you should have to be asking questions. You see, so it's up to you to become self-educating. It's up to you to discover your class background. It's up to you to discover your class history and to learn to be proud of it. It's exciting, it's vibrant, it's beautiful, and it's ultimately far more useful than the best history that you learned in your school. Just like me in high school, I learned the history of the generals, the industrialists, and the presidents who didn't get caught. Nothing that was going to help me to go out and get my first job and control the condition of my labor, you see. You've got to learn that yourself. You've got to go out and seek out the people who know how to do that and who are doing that. Just like I said, we are innately cooperative. The best way we found to make a good deal in the marketplace selling our labor is to organize, is to come together and form a union, form an association, and act together. There are some things in this world you can get done alone. All a union ever was is a way to get things done together that you can't get done by yourself. That's as far as labor is concerned. Now, you can't separate labor and peace. You know, you can't talk about people who create the wealth of the country and don't own it, being sent off with gun in hand to protect the wealth that you've created on behalf of the people who don't do a damn thing for it. You know, we've got to learn how to stop doing that. You know, the two are hooked together. The environment is absolutely obvious, isn't it? We just said that earlier. It's the planet we're standing on. It's the sky we're standing under. It's the water that we drink. It's the air we breathe. And that's the substance of our life, and we protect and defend that. No compromise in defense of Mother Earth, you see. Because if we blow that, then war and peace doesn't matter. We will be silent. There will be silence. But there'll only be the silence of spring, and that's when the animals take over. Hooray for them.
According to my source, the end of the world will be on February 14th in the year 2016.
Valentine's Day. Bummer.
It's the end of the world as we know it. I feel fine.
Slaves, and welcome to another edition of It's the End of the World as we know it and I feel fine. The show where we eat psychics for breakfast. I am your host, the Stimulator. And as with most shows, let's just start with oil. As the price of crude was hitting another record at $135 a barrel, peak oil deniers were busily trying to erase their erroneous predictions. The most prominent prophet of this stupidity is this goofy-looking motherfucker right here. Dr. Daniel Yergin has been an oil industry bitch for some time. You know, one of those people who gets paid handsomely to say everything is going to be okay.
You said 57 to 58, that's for this year. What about 08?
We would, at this point, would be looking at about $4 lower.
That was the doctor back in February of 2007, and his crack rock ball told him we will be looking at about $54 a barrel or so this year. But let's fast forward to August of the same year.
Have you changed any of your view on what a fair price for a barrel of crude should be right now?
No. We are still seeing this year, we think, at the prices in the low 70s, as long as there are no major disruptions. And next year, we think the price is several dollars lower, perhaps mid-60s, as the supply and demand balance looks different.
One wonders how one sensible, promising young man can turn into such a corporate tool. Here's Yergin back in the 70s with a little more hair, brains, and common sense.
Americans have grown up with a vision of unlimited resources, of endless abundance, and for much of our history that has been the case. But in the last decade, we've run into a problem where we have constraints, where there are limits now.
These days, Yergin still denies peak oil has anything to do with crude prices, but safely predicts oil prices to hit $150 a barrel this year. Sad, isn't it? Steering the shit stew a little bit more is Iran. In a story that has received very little media coverage, the world's fourth largest producer of oil declared that it will no longer trade crude in dollars, and will now switch to the euro and the yen. Let's see how much buying power that stimulus check you should be getting any time now gets you. But enough about oil. That shit's fucking boring. On to a more interesting subject. Coal. Earth First activists blocked the entrance to Dominion Power's James River headquarters for several hours, causing a major traffic jam. The activists are opposing plans to build a new coal-fired power plant in Wise County, Virginia. As expected, the Popo took sides with the corporate polluters, but it took them some time to figure out how to unlock the activists from their cement-filled trash cans. Another eco-defender, Eric McDavid, was sentenced to 19 years in prison for allegedly plotting to blow up a dam and a forest genetics research facility. The case is the latest chapter in the Green Scare, a witch hunt against so-called eco-terrorists, but more on that in the second half of the show. This instance is alarming because of the lengths the feds will go to entrap people in the movement. The FBI contracted an infiltrator named Anna, who supplied the explosive materials and diagrams, and a safe house where plans and bombs could be made. If you would like to send letters of support to Eric, visit his website, supporteric.org. And the show would not be the same without a quote from our favorite stand-up comedian.
Some seem to believe that we should negotiate with the terrorists and radicals as if some ingenious argument will persuade them they have been wrong all along. We've heard this foolish delusion before. As Nazi tanks crossed into Poland in 1939, an American senator declared, "Lord, if I could only have talked to Hitler, all this might have been avoided."
Now, wait a minute. Did he really mean that? The ass-wiping corporate media has been making a big deal about this quote and the connection to Barack Obama's intention to negotiate with Iran. But those incompetent meat puppets completely missed the point. Resident Douchebag is completely right about this. Now, before you call me crazy, just hear me out. Let's say that instead of saying Hitler, he would have said, I don't know, Bush. Listen.
Lord, if I could only have talked to George W., all this might have been avoided.
Well, millions of us have been trying to talk to Bush, but the rest of them just won't listen. So what is this dim-witted son of a bitch really trying to tell us?
If Nazis or other fascists took over North America, what would we all do? What would we do if they implemented Mussolini's definition of fascism? Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism because it's a merger of state and corporate power. What if this occupied country called itself a democracy, but most everyone understood elections to be shams, with citizens allowed to choose between different wings of the same fascist or following Mussolini's corporate party? What if anti-government activity was opposed by stormtroopers and secret police? Would you fight back? If there already existed a resistance movement, would you join it? Would you resist if the fascists irradiated the countryside, poisoned food supplies, made rivers unfit for swimming, and so filthy you wouldn't even dream of drinking from them anymore? If fascists systematically deforested the continent, would you join an underground army of resistance, head to the forests, and from there to boardrooms in the halls of the Reichstag to pick off the occupying deforesters, and most especially those who give them the marching orders?
That was a clip from Submedia's upcoming film, And Civ, inspired by the writings of Derek Jensen. We are currently working on this project and are planning discreet coverage of the Republicrat conventions. Yep, this is the type of shit you don't get to see on CNN or Fox. And since we are not sucking on that corporate teat, we rely on viewers for support. In the coming weeks, you'll be getting a little kickback from the president. So since you'll have a little extra cash, why not throw some our way and help us make these projects a reality? To help us out, simply go to stimulator.tv and click on the Stimulator Stimulating Stimulus package, where you can get some swag in exchange for some of your much depreciated greenbacks. You don't have to watch this show to know that we are fucking up the world in a hurry. Some environmental activists feel that the time to ask nicely is over, and that we have limited time to stop corporations from blowing shit up. So, they blow shit up. The feds call them terrorists, but they call themselves the ELF or ELF. To find out more about the ELF, I spoke with Dr. Michael Becker, a professor of political science at California State University and co-author of Igniting a Revolution. Hey Mike, how the fuck are you?
Doing great.
So, what the fuck is the ELF?
The ELF is our initials for the Earth Liberation Front, and the Earth Liberation Front has been an organization which has been around and active in Europe and in the United States and in a few other places, and it is an international underground organization that is organized into autonomous cells. Each cell operates independently from the others, and there's no central hierarchy or central organization, and that allows the Earth Liberation Front to engage in economic sabotage, which is the main tactic the ELF uses to try to protect wild places, protect species from the ravages of capitalism and from those who would profit off the destruction of species or the destruction of wild places.
Is the ELF related to the ALF?
The Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front are fairly closely related insofar as their tactics and the principles behind those tactics are quite similar. The Earth Liberation Front and Animal Liberation Front follow three basic guidelines that they distribute quite widely. And the first guideline is to inflict maximum economic damage in order to sabotage economically corporations, individuals, entities that are seeking to profit off the natural world, the destruction of the natural world. The ALF mostly is involved in raids on animal research laboratories, on fur farms, but also to inflict maximum economic destruction on entities that are seeking to harm animals, abuse them for profit. The second guideline is to publicize those actions and try to educate the public about why those actions are necessary forms of defense for animal lives, defense of natural places. And the third of those guidelines is to take all reasonable precautions to make sure that no animals or humans are physically harmed in the course of those actions.
What are the most memorable actions the ELF has taken?
The most memorable include the arson against a ski lift and a new lodge that was being developed in Vail, Colorado. Activists hiked in miles to an elevation of around 11,000 feet and used multiple arson devices to cause about $12 million of damage against the site, and one of the largest ELF actions. The other probably is an arson attack on a condominium development in a box canyon in San Diego. The ELF and ALF together have caused well over $100 million in economic damage in the past 12 years or so.
Has the ELF ever killed any people?
Even by the government's admission, the Earth Liberation Front, and for that matter the Animal Liberation Front, have never harmed a single individual. There's never been one person who's been physically harmed in any fashion by any action taken on behalf of the Animal Liberation Front or the Earth Liberation Front. And that's a record that I believe the activists in those organizations are quite proud of. They believe in the defense of life and not harm to life. So it would be at odds with their principles to take actions which would harm any human being or non-human animal for that matter.
Is the ELF a bunch of terrorists?
Terrorists, by definition, intentionally physically harm humans. Those are their targets. They're human targets inflicting physical damage and taking life to raise their particular political objective. On the contrary, the terrorists in the world are the corporations that kill thousands of people. Think of Bhopal in India, thousands of people killed by the negligence, the clear negligence. And of course, harm to the environment through pollution, through air pollution, the harm to children and elders. These are the actual terrorists. And for that matter, the Earth and Animal Liberation Front are trying to raise the consciousness of people to conduct themselves in a more highly ethical fashion, in a fashion that involves compassion, in a fashion that is based on preserving life, not taking life. So this allegation of terrorism is perfectly absurd and ridiculous. It's an attempt by the government to try to scare people.
I reported on some houses outside Seattle being torched, and the action was attributed to the ELF. What's your opinion about that?
I think the action in Seattle, like all Earth Liberation Front actions, was a necessary and justified act of defense of a location, of a place that was being virtually destroyed by a housing development which claimed that it was doing green building. It was building enormous houses, 4-car garages, just ridiculous. And it was building near a creek with an endangered salmon run. In addition to that, people had roundly and almost universally opposed this development. It was nevertheless approved. And so I think the Earth Liberation Front was doing what was necessary to really uphold the law. If the law is to represent people's interests, and certainly if the law is to try to protect some of the remaining important wild places and wild species, then the Earth Liberation Front was actually upholding the law.
Why torch a house when you can sign a petition?
If you do some research on the biography of Earth Liberation Front activists, at least those who have for a variety of reasons, talked a little bit about their background, then I think what you find is that many of these activists go through a personal sort of evolutionary process, and they begin with the most benign state-sanctioned tactics. They begin by trying to have people sign petitions. They begin by engaging in legal protests. And they find that this has virtually no impact on the course of destruction of the natural world around us. And it seems to me that they begin to become frustrated and perhaps somewhat desperate, and begin to engage in acts of civil disobedience, more traditional kinds of civil disobedience, and often find that too does not slow down this juggernaut in any way, and they continue to see wild places falling before chainsaws or for housing developments. And so that leads them to take further action. And so petitions are fine. I have no problem with people signing petitions. I support that. I have no problem with people voting. I support that. Those are important things to do. But there's a gamut of tactics, and any important social change, any important or significant change in politics or society or economics has always been accompanied by more direct forms and more dramatic forms of action in defense of principle.
And that about does it for this edition of It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine. For links to Mike Becker and information on the ELF, just visit my fucking website, stimulator.tv.
Remember, kids, you can podcast high-quality video of this show at submedia.tv.
Ha 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 ha!